It's been a heavy night. Betrayal, arrest, a midnight trial. While Jesus stands falsely accused and abused before the Sanhedrin upstairs, down in the courtyard below, Peter faces his own trial. A trial he never saw coming. You see, on the one night, there are two trials. G'day, Stuart Holman with you again for Growing Disciples as we follow Jesus' journey to the cross. Earlier that night, Peter had boldly declared that he'd never abandon Jesus. And yet now, in the glow of firelight, the strength of Peter's resolve quickly crumbles under the pressure of scrutiny. Now Peter was sitting out in the courtyard, and a servant girl came to him. "You also were with Jesus of Galilee," she said. But he denied it, before them all. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. Then he went out into the gateway, where another servant girl saw him and said to the people there, "This fellow was with Jesus of Nazareth." He denied it again, with an oath. "I don't know the man." After a little while, those standing there went up to Peter and said, "Surely you're one of them. Your accent gives you away." Then Peter began to call down curses and he swore to them, "I don't know the man." Immediately, a rooster crowed. Then Peter remembered the word Jesus had spoken. "Before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. He went outside and wept bitterly. So notice the contrast here. Above, before the Sanhedrin, Jesus faces false accusations, bearing faithful witness despite the threats, the mockery and the violence. And then below, Peter, brave Peter, wilts under the same simple accusation of a servant girl. Jesus boldly declares himself Messiah, Son of God, Son of Man, under immense pressure. Peter fearfully denies truth at the slightest provocation. And let's be gentle with Peter, because his struggle, it's all too familiar, right? When following Jesus brings the glare of unwanted attention, the sting of mockery or the threat of rejection, we too may feel the pressure to sink back. Peter's bitter tears show he genuinely loves Jesus. But in a moment of fear, he chose self-protection over faithful testimony. How often are we tempted to stay silent when standing for Jesus might cost us popularity, comfort, or acceptance? Peter's painful moment of weakness urges us to reflect on our own responses. Yet this isn't the end of Peter, and it needn't define us either. Jesus' steadfastness in his trial was not just an example, it secured grace for Peter's failure and for ours. Peter's bitter tears show us he genuinely loves Jesus. But in a moment of fear, he chose self-protection over faithful testimony. How often are we tempted to stay silent when standing up for Jesus might cost us popularity, comfort, or acceptance? Peter's painful moment of weakness urges us to reflect on our own responses. Yet this is not the end for Peter, and it's definitely not the end for us either. See, Jesus' steadfastness in his trial was not just an example, it secured grace for Peter's failure and ours. Peter's tears are not the end of his story, but a turning point, a new beginning that prepares him for Jesus' invitation to restoration, actually for forgiveness and renewed boldness. Remember, he tells him later, asks him 3 times, "Peter, do you love me?" You see, Peter's story is more than a sideshow to Jesus' passion narrative. It matters. It's a moment to reflect on our own responses to Jesus. But we know the story rolls on. So let me tell you, or at least remind you, what happened next. At first light, the chief priests and the religious leaders finalised their plans to have Jesus executed. They tied him up and they marched him off to Pilate, the governor. And Judas, seeing clearly that, Jesus is actually condemned to death now, he feels deep regret. He returned the 30 silver coins to the priests, confessing, "Look, I've sinned, I've betrayed an innocent man." But their cold reply, "Not our problem, mate, that's your problem." And Judas flung the coins into the temple and left and took his own life. And picking up the silver, the priest said, "Well, we can't put blood money in the offering." So they used it instead to buy a field, the potter's field. And they used it as a cemetery for outsiders. And ever since it's been known as Field of Blood, actually fulfilling Jeremiah's prophecy. They took the 30 silver pieces, the price placed on him by some sons of Israel, and bought the potter's field as the Lord had instructed. Meanwhile, Jesus stood before Pontius Pilate. "Are you the king of the Jews?" Pilate asked. And Jesus answered simply, "You've said it, and you'll see that it's true." But facing accusations piled high by the priests and leaders, Jesus remained silent. Not a word, and Pilate's amazed at his composure. Of course, it was Pilate's custom during the Passover to release a prisoner that would be chosen by the crowd, and this year there was a notorious prisoner, ironically named Jesus Barabbas. So Pilate asked, "Who should I release, Jesus Barabbas or Jesus called the Messiah?" He saw through the priest's envy, and while Pilate weighed up his decision, his wife urgently messaged him, "Don't touch that innocent man. I've had nightmares about him all night." But the priests persuaded the crowd to demand Barabbas and to insist on Jesus' execution. So Pilate, when he asked again, "Who shall I free?" they shouted, "Barabbas! What should I do with Jesus, your Messiah?" "Crucify him," came the crowd's reply. "Why? What has he done wrong?" Pilate asked. But they screamed louder, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" Now, seeing the situation is kind of spiralling towards a riot, Pilate washes his hands in front of the crowd. "I'm innocent of this man's blood. He's your responsibility now." Chillingly, the crowd replied, "Let his blood be on us and on our children." Now, Pilate then released Barabbas. He had Jesus whipped and handed him over for crucifixion.